Nature, according to her way, had made no deviation in the path he had marked out for himself. From being slender he had now become meager, once pale, he was now yellow, his deep-set eyes were hollow, and the gold spectacles shielding his eyes seemed to be an integral portion of his face. He dressed entirely in black, with the exception of his white tie, and his funeral appearance was only mitigated by the slight line of red ribbon which passed almost imperceptibly through his buttonhole, and appeared like a streak of blood traced with a delicate brush. Although master of himself, Monte Cristo scrutinized with irrepressible curiosity the magistrate whose salute he returned, and who, distrustful by habit, and especially incredulous as to social prodigies, was much more despised to look upon the noble stranger, as Monte Cristo was already called, as an adventurer in search of new fields, or an escaped criminal, rather than as a prince of the Holy See, or a sultan of the 1,001 Nights. "Sir," said Villefort, in the squeaky tone assumed by magistrates in their oratorical periods, and of which they cannot, or will not, divest themselves in society, "Sir, the signal service which you yesterday rendered to my wife and son has made it a duty for me to offer you my thanks." "I have come, therefore, to discharge this duty, and to express to you my overwhelming gratitude." And as he said this, the eye severe of the magistrate had lost nothing of its habitual arrogance. He spoke in a voice of the Procureur General, with the rigid inflexibility of neck and shoulders which caused his flatterers to say, as we have before observed, that he was the living statue of the law. "Monsieur," replied the Count, with a chilling air, "I am very happy to have been the means of preserving a son to his mother, for they say that the sentiment of maternity is the most holy of all, and the good fortune which occurred to me, monsieur, might have enabled you to dispense with a duty which, in its discharge, confers an undoubtedly great honor, for I am aware that M. de Villefort is not usually lavish of the favor which he now bestows on me, a favor which, however estimable, is unequal to the satisfaction which I have in my own consciousness." Villefort, astonished at this reply, which he by no means expected, started like a soldier who feels the blow leveled at him over the armor he wears, and a curl of his disdainful lip indicated that from that moment he noted in the tablets of his brain that the Count of Monte Cristo was by no means a highly bred gentleman. He glanced around, in order to seize on something on which the conversation might turn, and seemed to fall easily on a topic. He saw the map which Monte Cristo had been examining when he entered, and said, "You seem geographically engaged, sir? It is a rich study for you, who, as I learn, have seen as many lands as are delineated on this map." "Yes, sir," replied the Count, "I have sought to make of the human race, taken in the mass, what you practice every day on individuals, a physiological study." "I have believed it was much easier to descend from the whole to a part than to ascend from a part to the whole." It is an algebraic axiom, which makes us proceed from a known to an unknown quantity, and not from an unknown to a known. But sit down, sir, I beg of you. Monte Cristo pointed to a chair, which the procureur was obliged to take the trouble to move forwards himself, while the Count merely fell back into his own, on which he had been kneeling when M. Villefort entered. Thus the Count was halfway turned towards his visitor, having his back towards the window, his elbow resting on the geographical chart which furnished the theme of conversation for the moment, a conversation which assumed, as in the case of the interviews with Danglars and Mercier, a turn analogous to the persons, if not to the situation. "Ah, you philosophize," replied Villefort, after a moment's silence, during which, like a wrestler who encounters a powerful opponent, he took breath. "Well, sir, really, if, like you, I had nothing else to do, I should seek a more amusing occupation." "Why, in truth, sir," was Monte Cristo's reply, "man is but an ugly caterpillar for him who studies him through a solar microscope. But you said, I think, that I had nothing else to do." "Now, really, let me ask, sir, have you? Do you believe you have anything to do? Or to speak in plain terms, do you really think that what you do deserves being called anything?" Villefort's astonishment redoubled at this second thrust so forcibly made by his strange adversary. It was a long time since the magistrate had heard a paradox so strong, or rather, to say the truth more exactly, it was the first time he had ever heard of it. The procureur exerted himself to reply. "Sir," he responded, "you are a stranger, and I believe you say yourself that a portion of your life has been spent in Oriental countries, so you are not aware how human justice, so expeditious in barbarous countries, takes with us a prudent and well-studied course. Oh, yes, yes, I do. Sir, it is the peggiolato of the ancients. I know all that, for it is with the justice of all countries especially that I have occupied myself, it is with the criminal procedure of all nations that I have compared natural justice, and I must say, sir, that it is the law of primitive nations, that is, the law of retaliation, that I have most frequently found to be according to the law of God. If this law were adopted, sir, said the procureur, it would greatly simplify our legal codes, and in that case the magistrates would not, as you just observed, have much to do. It may, perhaps, come to this in time, observed Monte Cristo. You know that human inventions march from the complex to the simple, and simplicity is always perfection. In the meanwhile, continued the magistrate, our codes are in full force, with all their contradictory enactments derived from Gallic customs, Roman laws, and Frank usages, the knowledge of all which, you will agree, is not to be acquired without extended labor. It needs tedious study to acquire this knowledge, and, when acquired, a strong power of brain to retain it. I agree with you entirely, sir, but all that even you know with respect to the French code, I know, not only in reference to that code, but as regards the codes of all nations. The English, Turkish, Japanese, Hindu laws, are as familiar to me as the French laws, and thus I was right, when I said to you, that relatively, you know that everything is relative, sir, that relatively to what I have done, you have very little to do, but that relatively to all I have learned, you have yet a great deal to learn. But with what motive have you learned all this? Inquired Villefort, in astonishment. Monte Cristo smiled. Really, sir, he observed, I see that in spite of the reputation which you have acquired as a superior man, you look at everything from the material and vulgar view of society, beginning with man, and ending with man, that is to say, in the most restricted, most narrow view which it is possible for human understanding to embrace. Pray, sir, explain yourself, said Villefort, more and more astonished. I really do not understand you perfectly. I say, sir, that with the eyes fixed on the social organization of nations, you see only the springs of the machine, and lose sight of the sublime workman who makes them act. I say that you do not recognize before you and around you any but those office holders whose commissions have been signed by a minister or king, and that the men whom God has put above those office holders, ministers, and kings, by giving them a mission to follow out, instead of a post to fill, I say that they escape your narrow, limited field of observation. It is thus that human weakness fails, from its debilitated and imperfect organs. Tobias took the angel who restored him to light for an ordinary young man. The nations took Attila, who was doomed to destroy them, for a conqueror similar to other conquerors, and it was necessary for both to reveal their missions, that they might be known and acknowledged, one was compelled to say. I am the angel of the Lord, and the other. I am the hammer of God, in order that the divine essence in both might be revealed. Then, said Villefort, more and more amazed, and really supposing he was speaking to a mystic or a madman, you consider yourself as one of those extraordinary beings whom you have mentioned? And why not? Said Monte Cristo coldly. Your pardon, sir, replied Villefort, quite astounded, but you will excuse me if, when I presented myself to you, I was unaware that I should meet with a person whose knowledge and understanding so far surpass the usual knowledge and understanding of men. It is not usual with us corrupted wretches of civilization to find gentlemen like yourself, possessors, as you are, of immense fortune, at least, so it is said, and I beg you to observe that I do not inquire, I merely repeat, it is not usual, I say, for such privileged and wealthy beings to waste their time in speculations on the state of society, in philosophical reveries, intended at best to console those whom fate has disinherited from the goods of this world. Really, sir, retorted the Count, have you attained the eminent situation in which you are, without having admitted, or even without having met with exceptions? And do you never use your eyes, which must have acquired so much finesse and certainty, to divine, at a glance, the kind of man by whom you are confronted? Should not a magistrate be not merely the best administrator of the law, but the most crafty expounder of the chicanery of his profession, a steel probe to search hearts, a touchstone to try the gold which in each soul is mingled with more or less of alloy? Sir, said Villefort, upon my word, you overcome me. I really never heard a person speak as you do. Because you remain eternally encircled in a round of general conditions, and have never dared to raise your wings into those upper spheres which God has peopled with invisible or exceptional beings. And you allow then, sir, that spheres exist, and that these marked and invisible beings mingle amongst us? Why should they not? Can you see the air you breathe, and yet without which you could not for a moment exist? Then we do not see those beings to whom you allude? Yes, we do. You see them whenever God pleases to allow them to assume a material form. You touch them, come in contact with them, speak to them, and they reply to you. Ah, said Villefort, smiling, I confess I should like to be warned when one of these beings is in contact with me. You have been served as you desire, monsieur, for you were warned just now, and I now again warn you. Then you yourself are one of these marked beings? Yes, monsieur, I believe so, for until now, no man has found himself in a position similar to mine. The dominions of kings are limited either by mountains or rivers, or a change of manners, or an alteration of language. My kingdom is bounded only by the world, for I am not an Italian, or a Frenchman, or a Hindu, or an American, or a Spaniard, I am a cosmopolite. No country can say it saw my birth. God alone knows what country will see me die. I adopt all customs, speak all languages.